Welcome, everybody, to our fourth Accelerating AI Conference podcast. Can't believe we're on podcast number 4. I've got my colleagues, Matthew and Andy, long-term veterans of the AI Conference Master team. And today we're going to be talking about some really exciting things. One of the the most exciting thing is our white paper that has been released recently. So we've had a remake of our website. If you've not seen it, www.acceleratingai.co.uk, where you will find the copy of our white paper. So we're going to be discussing that today and discussing the elements and our findings. So really great to take you along on this journey. And one more thing before we move on. Exciting news. We've got our next Accelerating AI conference taking place in October as part of MK Tech Week. So yeah, you want to say a quick hi, guys?
Yeah. Hi, Matthew from Cube. Hopefully this isn't the first time you've watched our podcast and you know that. We don't have to go through big lengthy intros, but just to add on that point about the website and the conference coming up, all the details about the conference will be put on the website as and when we have them. So at the moment we have a venue and we have a date, and obviously ourselves as initial speakers, but we're just looking at the agenda and the format and the structure of it. So the best thing you can do is go on their website, click on the register button, pre-register for the event. You'll be the first to know as and when we have further information about that conference. Andy?
Yeah, hi everyone, it's Andy. Really excited to go through this next episode with you guys. I think there's some really meaty stuff we're going to go through in that white paper in a second. I guess another thing to add on as well on that website that we've just launched is the fact that we have partners that we're trying to work with. So if you're interested in partnering, whether that's through hosting a stand, through to actually delivering a keynote, there are some criteria around that. Go to our website and check our how to partner with us section on the website to get involved. So we'd love to talk to you.
Amazing. Right. Matthew, do you want to get the presentation?
Yes, we've got some lovely visuals. Bear with me 1 second and I'll just get that up on the screen. Fantastic. There we are.
Great. There you go. The white paper called From Curiosity to Capability, because that's exactly where lots of SMEs are stuck right now. They're curious. Their staff are testing tools. The staff are flying and doing things on their own, but nothing's actually changed in the organization. So we know that, AI adoption is no longer about awareness. And we know most businesses know that AI really, really matters. The question is whether they can use it safely and repeatedly in their business. So out of the conference, guys, what was the one finding that made each of you stop and think?
I think I can summarize it as the sentiment from lots of SMEs is that they feel that they've got this AI thing nailed down, as in like there's an element of I'm going to say how it is naivety, quite frankly, among some business owners. They and you'll see it in the stats that we share. An overwhelming majority said that they had somebody responsible for AI and they were implementing AI in their business. But then you actually look at the reality of how much time is being spent on implementing AI in the business. And I think that was the stark difference between, oh, we're doing AI, and yeah, but are you really doing AI? Are you taking it seriously? Are you investing the time, effort, energy, money in adopting AI and transforming your business in light of the technology? I don't know whether that resonates with you guys and if that's sort of how you felt as well.
Yeah,
Andy,
I mean, from my side, one of the stats I remember was roughly 2 in 3 businesses that were represented in our survey said that they were still at experimentation and not really, therefore, in full production of using tools. And that's really evidence that suggests that people are still barely scratching the surface of what's possible with AI. And I think there's still a massive opportunity. There's clearly a huge capability gap, and I'm just really hoping that this white paper will shed more light onto the realities of businesses across the South Midlands and perhaps across the UK, and that there's a further opportunity for businesses to really think about how they can go from, as it says on the tin here, curiosity to capability. Right? How do we actually get people to get their hands into and onto the tools and capabilities out there that are readily available, whether it's in a Microsoft system or Claude or Google Gemini or whatever, fill in the blank.
Yeah, I think it's a really good time to actually move on to the next slide, because those stats are there for us to have a quick chat about.
So here we go. The The headline figures, 63% were just exploring or in early experimentation. 81.5% said someone was at least somewhat responsible for AI within their organization. But here's the kicker in the teeth, right? Only 7.4% of businesses had dedicated regular time or had projects dedicated to AI or learning AI, right? So here's a bit of a talking point. So we know this is not because of lack of interest. Right, everywhere you turn, somebody's banging about AI. Right, we know that it's all pointing to a lack of structure, time, and ownership. So I think the question is are SMEs really adopting AI, or are they still just fiddling and experimenting with it? And if they are, well, why aren't they moving past that phase right now? What do you think, Am?
Yeah, I think there's also people are interested and curious enough that they don't know what they don't know. We have the privilege, the three of us, to be kind of at the cutting edge, to be able to play with these tools and really understand not the breadth of tools, but some of the depth in the capabilities of these tools. For instance, I love to play with Claude, right? I love to play with the interface. I love playing with the CLI. There's like some fantastic tools in there, and agent and sub-agent architecture orchestration. But I think people have just barely, and this is what we were hearing in the room at the conference, and I guess across people and businesses that we engage with every day, is that really they've just figured out how to use, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot, and how to prompt and receive information. So that functionality of just retrieval of information one way is kind of what most organizations know today. But taking that from retrieval to actually action based or agentic AI, which is really action based thinking and reasoning, that's kind of where the next primary frontier and next horizon of AI is moving towards. And so I think there's like a massive gap between what some businesses think where we are to actually where we are in reality, and that's just testament to the 7.4% on this slide, where you don't really see the dedicated time, because let's face it, SMEs are really busy. They have lots of stuff to do, and that's why they need these knowledge places of knowledge, whether it's from our podcast, which we hope you find useful, or a conference, but also other means online. So yeah, I think that's kind of explains it.
And I've got, if you don't mind, I've got a couple of points to just add on that. First around context around these numbers. It's really important to point out that all of the insight that is in the white paper that we're referring to, and these stats are taken from, it was gathered from around 100 attendees that came to our conference. Okay, so they came to our conference in June 2026, just for anyone watching this months or years down the line. And they came to the conference, they were SMEs, they were already interested in AI, as in they'd gone to the steps of going, I need to go and learn more about this, and they've booked on and they've come along. And if you haven't booked on and come along to any of our events before, please get yourself booked onto the October one. So what does that mean? Well, that means that these numbers are already skewed, right? They're skewed in the favor of people who are genuinely interested and their eyes are already open. I think the true number, that 7.4%, is actually much lower. I think that is not reflective of the region as a whole, and I think that's really concerning. And that to me was the context even behind those stark numbers is actually paints an even worse picture in terms of the state of adoption. The other point I want to just make is AI has always been artificial intelligence. We talked about it at previous events. It's not a new concept, right? It's been around for a very long time. But what we've seen over the last few years, especially over the last 1 to 2 years, is the explosion of what AI is, and the broad, as you said, the broad breadth and depth of what AI is, right? So just in conversation, when you're talking to an SME or a business owner, or people are coming along to our conference, and you're talking about AI as a concept, you are talking about a very broad umbrella term, right? When you really dive into that, one person's idea of what AI is and their mastery of it is that they can use prompts in ChatGPT, and that is the limit of their knowledge. Yeah. And then the opposite end of that spectrum is everything you've just talked about, Andy, which is frontier models, building agents, fully autonomous processes and systems, and also getting into real proper data analysis and insight and decision making based on artificial intelligence. So I think that's the functional gap, and that speaks to the 81.5%. You know, if you were really honest with yourselves as SMEs in that region, and if you came along to the event and you were part of those polls, would you answer that question differently if we really dug into, you know, building out AI, agentic AI systems? I think the real percentage of businesses doing that is fractional, tiny amounts of businesses doing that. And I don't blame you, because it's very complicated. It's a very scary concept to give an agent a job and get it to go and do something on its own, right? And being honest, as people who are using this technology, it ain't perfect, right? It comes back with some strange results. It takes refinement. It takes a lot of work, and it's almost an art, isn't it, guys, to build these agentic systems. It isn't something that comes inherent with you know, as you say, busy SMEs who are running a business, and you know, this is another whole skill that they've got to learn and pick up. So I just think that's really interesting that there's these different facets to what we're talking about here, and the numbers are great, but they don't necessarily paint the right picture.
Yeah.
Li-
So, you
I've
know,
got a question, Lionel. I've got a question for you. Right, that 81.5% said someone was at least somewhat responsible for AI. I feel like while that is a live survey and a poll that we got, like, what do you think people really interpreted in that? Because I kind of find that hard to. That's kind of a little bit subjective, perhaps, in what that means, right? What do you think?
yeah. So that means, from the experience I've had recently, face to face in front of customers, that is, oh, that's Bob. You know, Bob determines what we do with AI, because Bob's the boff, right? And Bob is one of 50 people in the organization, or one of 20 people in the organization. And so I think that broadly what that represents. But I just want to go back to some of the stuff you were talking about, Matthew, and underpinning those numbers. And we follow the Microsoft Work Trend Index. And, you know, adoption is roughly 20% of businesses adopt AI and use AI, right? 80% don't. And of the 20% using AI, about only 3 to 4% of them use it in an agentic way, properly use it. So you were right about your inkling about the 7.4% is actually half of that, right? According to the latest Work Trend Index, which kind of, it's really interesting because it leads us on to, you know, on next section, which is really what we're calling the ownership gap. Lots of businesses have given AI, in principle, to someone to think about, but what they haven't done, and what we're finding out, is they haven't given them the time, the budget, the authority, or the governance to go ahead and do that, right? So I said that the organization is basically the blocker, not the people. It's the leaders. So what does that look like, right? We know that people are using AI phenomenally in their personal lives, whether it's apps, whether it's bits that make funny pictures or video, or compiling a document or writing a letter. It's being used extensively. We also know that, you know, from research, that people who are interested in AI have this massive fear of missing out and not keeping ahead of what's and possibly and that's giving them that anxiety about their jobs. And so they're purposely looking at this. We're finding is that business leaders aren't taking the lead in it. And they aren't saying to willing employees that we've made a decision on an AI tool that you can use to better yourself every day, right? And that for us is well, that's where I see that ownership gap coming, Rose. I mean, Matthew, what's your take on that?
I think you're exactly right. I think if you look at particularly small business teams, you know, you've got your one man band, so your founder, owner, operator that is wearing all the hats, right? So for them, if they can just save a little bit of their time in their day-to-day job, that's success for them, right? They get, and we've talked before in previous podcasts about that sort of maximizing ROI. The smaller the team, the more you can actually get the value out of it, and also you have less friction in a smaller organization to roll out new tools and new ways of doing things. But as the team starts to grow and you get into 10, 15, 20, 30 staff, that sort of ballpark, it is a struggle and I've experienced it in my own business. I'm sure you guys have with your own teams. You know, you've got people who are at various different stages of that journey, and you can't just delegate AI to one person, right? It isn't one person's job. It needs to be woven into the fabric of how you operate your business throughout. By all means, have somebody spearhead that, and I think that's really, really needed in an organization. You need people that are curious and want to play with the technology to really understand it and then be advocates for it and spot opportunities within the organization to implement those changes. But you've also got to do the job of education as well. You've got to educate your workforce on it. So I think there's this tendency with small businesses to end up with a split workforce. You get people who are actively avoiding the technology at this point, through to people who are running away with tools and getting on with it. And because somebody in the business is responsible for AI, that's it. We've solved it, right? And I think, and this is a moving target, okay? The technologies that we're playing with today, the tools that we're using today, are very different from the tools we were using 6 months ago. And inevitably, by the time our conference comes around in October, there'll be an explosion of new tools and new models and lots of things that you can do. So I think this is a constant. It's a constant target to be watching in a business, and I think it needs to be front and center of your business plan. It needs to be really, it needs to be really prominent in how you're planning your next month, 6 months, 12 months, and I've said it before as well. Throw away the 3-5 year business plan, because I think that's too far ahead for businesses to be concerned with at the moment. I think there's real challenges right now. So that line there, responsibility without time is theatre, right? Simply saying you're adopting AI and delegating isn't gonna change anything. And I think that kind of speaks to the next slide, actually, Lionel, if you want me to push on
please,
to
if you wouldn't mind.
that.
Yeah. So what are we talking about? We're talking about effectively tools versus workflows, right? So people are using ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini, lots of flavors. And you know, a lot of the tools that they're using on a day-to-day, like Microsoft Office, is all founded on and has Copilot attached to it. So Andy, when does a task become suitable for an agent rather than something that's just a chatbot?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, you know, if I can just come to the first point here on this slide about ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini useful, but not the same as an AI-enabled business. I think ultimately it starts off, and you kind of touched on this, is transformation doesn't really happen at the, you know, the individual sort of like parts of the organization. It starts at the top, right? And so whenever, you know, I'm engaging with a client or a company, I don't want to frankly be speaking to, while it's interesting to speak to a certain department, but the buy-in really has to start at the C-suite, whether that's the COO or the CEO, to become what we call an AI enabled business. Absolutely, these tools that are listed on this slide are super important and probably serve as the baseline of productivity in an organization. But truly to transform, right? We need to kind of start from the bottom up. Just yesterday, talking to a pretty large US-based enterprise, they're even rethinking governance, right? So governance as a protocol to set guardrails before implementation, they're actually now leaders are saying, what if we just made all the data available and then set the governance afterwards, which is a different mindset shift to, hey, like, what's the tool? Where's the data sitting? Who can access it, right? And now with these larger organizations, you know, we use US as a benchmark because let's face it, a lot of the technology comes there, and we need to think about, you know, a lot of the innovation that's coming there will eventually come here. But you know, the C-suite are really thinking about how does governance play a role in this? Because before it was like the first and foremost thing. Now we're seeing, or at least I'm hearing, is that leaders are just saying, actually, we know these tools are awesome, but we need to get, you know, the technology in and the data and the information available to folks. Where once previously the data was only limited to a certain number of people who only were limited, you know, to do certain tasks. And that's really interesting. And I think that's kind of the starting point of really having, you know, an AI enabled business or an agentic, you know, based business that is really digital workers, that are working for the organization, access to the disparate systems across an organization versus like, hey, like here's a module or a chatbot that can just kind of talk in and out to a document, and that's really it. That's kind of very narrow. The use cases are pretty tight, but I think the true value is kind of the access to a wider data set, and of course, with scale and security in mind as well.
I completely agree. That's very interesting insight. Matthew, yeah, being in the marketing sphere as a marketing company who's heavily AI enabled, I must say. Can you tell me where you've seen AI move beyond kind of content generation, um, and actually into creating proper operating change within an organization?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, there's two things I'd sort of say here. Firstly, the speed and pace at which you can have an idea and go forth and action said idea and have a workable output. The obvious one is websites, right? Websites, as recently as 6 months ago, it was kind of the old way, right? And there's still businesses out there doing it the old way, but there is this new way, and this new way is actually using AI to not only build the website but design the website, do the wireframes, go through the whole process. And actually, Claude as a platform is if you look at it, you can do the entire journey through Claude. I have no qualms in admitting that the accelerating AI website that we referred to at the start of this podcast was built with Claude, and for what it's worth, built in a couple of days. And that's just unheard of. Only as recently as 6 months ago, we were quoting for websites the old way, and now we're able to do things that just weren't possible. And that kind of leads into the second point, which is what's our role now, right? What is our role if we're not the people designing the site and then building the site and marketing the site? What is our role? And I think, and I said it in our conference, and I think we are having to reimagine what our role is as marketers, because we're still in my business, we're all still marketers. That's not, and it's never going to change. It's who we are. It's our DNA, right? We are marketers. It's our passion. But how we do it is going to change. How we do it is going to change in the same way that, I have the luxury of being 33, so I wasn't around much pre-internet, but the world had to adapt to the internet, and marketers were the same, right? A lot of what used to be done was print and direct mail, and then it's been morphed into digital, online. And in my lifetime, we've had the emergence of social media, and that's been an entirely new way to market to audiences. And I genuinely see this as like the next kind of phase of that transformation of how businesses market themselves. But I'm excited, and I can't get across how amazing this technology is to be able to have an idea and then do it and do it very, very quickly.
Yes.
That for me, and yes, governance. We talked about that at length, and it is something that needs to be taken really, really seriously. But if you're listening to this and you haven't dabbled with Claude and Claude Code and looked at some of the capabilities, some of the other platforms again can do similar things, but Claude is the one that seems to be sort of making waves in this particular space in terms of building apps and websites and that sort of stuff. So yeah, the question on there, we just want to throw a question back to you guys. We get asked, yeah, that's all well and good, Matt, but where do we even start? And frankly, I've had the same conversations with my team, right? They go, Matt, this all looks incredible, but where do I begin with this? So guys, where do I begin with like adopting AI in my business?
I think the answer is extremely simple. If it's mundane and if it's repetitive, it is absolutely right to be automated using AI. It's as simple as that. You start small, and we've got a little bit of a plan towards the end. There's some handy ways of how you can get started, but start small, get an effective workflow going using an agent, and over a short period of time, finesse it, and then move on to the next. And you keep doing that. And before you know it, you will have an ecosystem of agents doing your bidding. It's as simple as that.
Well,
And that's my opinion. Yeah.
it's a really good time to move to the next slide, because actually agents is part of this story, right? So yeah, over
Yeah.
to
So
you guys.
Exactly. Agents it's changing the conversation because AI, is no longer about chatbot. It's no longer about, can you go and research this? Agents they're becoming colleagues, they're becoming team members, they're becoming um, automated employees, they're becoming full on employees. And that's how they're being embraced, right? Um, for people who don't understand what an AI agent is, Andy, will you give us an insight into what an AI agent is?
Yeah, I'll do my best. So I think it's been thrown around quite a lot, right? Agents have different behaviors. You have autonomous agents, you have task-based agents, you have browser agents, you have, chat-based agents. I think the most sophisticated forms of agents today are these digital workers, right? These 24/7 out workers that are always on, autonomously operating. I think just yesterday, Claude released this ability to tag, where you can have a chat with Claude, which is almost like a personal assistant in a chat setting in Slack, and you can just almost kind of like go back and forth and ask questions. There's other tools out there like Hermes or OpenClaw, which are the more open source based advanced agentic personal assistants, right? Or agents that can be your helper assistant, whether that's crafting an email, telling you what's on your list to do, helping you curate some content, putting a calendar entry into or checking your calendar, putting a calendar entry in, right through to more sophisticated aspects like going into a system and retrieving data and summarizing it and telling you what to do, tells you the insight, and then asks you, shall I go do the action next?
Mm, mm,
And that's like agnostic of any system, provided there is a connection through a technical API, whatever. We won't need to go into that. But the ability to do that with just this idea of a digital worker or an agent is kind of like unlocked so much capability, because small businesses today don't have to hire necessarily somebody to do all of that work, because it's versatile enough. It can understand different types of language. You can train it. You can create skills to do repetitive things in a certain workflow, and you've got the ability to follow procedure, if built correctly. So yeah, the capability and the opportunity is pretty huge. Yeah, pretty exciting. What do you think, Lauren?
I mean,
How would you describe it?
I get asked all the time, how do AI and agents increase human agency, right? All the time, and I think it's rather simple. If you empower people to create agents, right, you end up with an employee who's managing a whole bunch of agents themselves that helps them become more efficient. And what it allows them over time is to have the thinking space and the capacity to then go out and do things that are truly helpful for the business, right? It helps them to use that spare capacity to come up with new ideas and new ways to streamline the business, new ways to make the business more profitable or better reach with customers, or doing the human thing, which is what we're doing, having conversations, building relationships. That's where the true power comes in. It's getting rid of the mundane stuff and doing the proper human-based stuff. So, y- you know, and one of the things I was going to ask you, Matthew, is we are going to allow all these people, all these agents, but what happens when these agents get trained in very bad workflows? You know,
Well, exactly, and that leads us really nicely onto our next slide, which is
yeah,
all of this stuff is really, really exciting, right? And as much as we are advocating for businesses to go and explore this technology and work out how it can help transform, change their business, and what we're also seeing is where it's being implemented really badly, right? And I have to say the most obvious and the most in the marketing world anyway, is LinkedIn and the experience on LinkedIn at the moment. I don't know what you guys think, but it feels almost like it's AI talking to AI 90% of the time. And it's, an AI post and then AI comments and engagement. And it's just getting a little bit, and that's because, it's a very basic thing to set up. It's a very basic agent to go on LinkedIn and post a post. And I started doing that as an experimentation very early on, and soon realized that it wasn't authentic. It wasn't coming across right. So I think we put together, I guess, this list of sort of reasons why these things fail or don't work very well when you sort of set them up. But the simplest way of putting it, I think, is if it doesn't work now, it's not going to work with an
Well, agree.
agent doing the process. If anything, it's just going to do it more often, more quickly, right? And that's effectively what the agent will do. So I sort of pressed this point at the conference, which is it won't fix broken workflows. So don't start trying to fix workflows with AI. Fix the workflow first, then apply AI over the top to make it more efficient, better, smarter, faster, and improve quality. So that's kind of that's the cautionary tale on this, is
Yeah.
basically what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I mean, very quickly, what do you think is the most common mistake SMEs are going to make this year with AI? Andy, what do you think?
Good question. I think the mistakes that they'll probably make are, I think there's like a lot of good demos out there, and I've burnt my fingers, being a practitioner in the space and following really good YouTube videos that look pristine. And I think it's really important to try it yourself. But having the right sort of frameworks in place, whether that's like the connectivity to a system, to good quality, data. I think those are kind of the baseline things. I think you've kind of highlighted them. But that said, the question is like, what kind of mistakes? I think the mistakes are going to be probably high expectations that a video or demo will work immediately and then it's production ready. The reality is that your 0 to 1 is always your 0 to 1. The moment you go from 1 to 1,000 and you're using it repeatedly, or your users are using it repeatedly, there's so many other things around distribution and loads that are really important, and access and security that are really, really important. So, but I do recommend people to just go play and try and follow tutorials.
I think just to expand on that, we're seeing websites cropping up left, right, and center that are not only would I be concerned that they just look like they've been built with AI, and then you lose all authenticity is gone, all credibility is gone, because the moment somebody goes, that's done with AI, they're turned off. And that's quite an interesting sort of psychological trait. We can't really get into that right now, but the other side of it is security. We're seeing applications being designed, built, and deployed that will be collecting real data, in some cases personal data, being hosted on a Replit instance or something like an online quick spin up a VPS with no real security principles being applied. And I think we're going to see some really big issues with hackings and people's data being stolen, and products being launched that get pulled quite quickly. And I think it's quite insane that businesses can do that, build the product, launch the product, sometimes one-man bands that have never wrote a line of code in their life, with no oversight from anybody who does know how to program. Like that frightens me. It excites me that you can do that stuff really quickly, and there's really big opportunity there. Massive risk. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to see play out until the technology gets to that next level of capability, I guess. We're kind of in that sweet spot of it can kind of do it, but not quite to the standard that is production ready. So yeah, that's my worry.
Yeah, can I just add to that? Like, I think there's been chat that, well, actually, you know what, I can create a security agent that can check the quality of and test it and penetration testing and things like that. But the reality is that these labs that are building this technology are actually hiring engineers more than ever, right? So there was this narrative, probably last 6 months or 5, 6 months that, what, we don't need engineers, we don't need technical teams. But actually, they've realized that you do need very sophisticated senior engineering expertise to review and ensure the quality of these systems are built well and securely. Otherwise, you're building and using AI slop that is potentially not useful and can expose everything you've just said, Matt.
I think outside of that, I think people are also very, very impressed by something that looks professional and not realizing it's founded on really, really bad, weak or untrue data, and it's happening all the time around me. But I think one of the mistakes really that will happen this year is, and I've mentioned this a few times before, if you take a human process and you add AI to the human process, you might get a 1x, 2x, 3x improvement in throughput. But I think it requires something fundamentally different. It requires the process to be thought in an agentic way. So start AI first and then decide what the human plays in that role of that process, right? To make it an AI process with human in the loop. And I think a lot of people will start to realize they can gain, 10, 20, 50x output if they change the way the process worked. But changing the process is a leap of faith, right? And you've got to have confidence, which means that you got to make a start with AI in a small way before you get to that point where you start thinking about AI processes and engaging with AI processes to run large swathes of what you do within your organizations, which leads us on to really the next, what should SMEs do next? Okay, don't try to boil the ocean. Run one serious, measured adoption cycle. You want to run us through that, Matthew?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's quite simple when you really boil it down. What we want to do is in your business, look at where your people are spending time. Where is their friction? Where is their work that people don't really enjoy doing? That's a really good place to start as well. What are the things that you do that are monotonous, that take time, that are really, almost a waste of your people's time? Look at those. Look at those as problems. Pick one. Just pick one. Don't try and fix them all in one go. Pick one and name somebody to fix that problem. Not to be the AI lead in terms of like generally AI lead. For this project, that person is going to solve the problem and they can use AI to solve that problem, right? Not they must, they can use AI if it's right and it makes sense to do so. And then go through that process of experimentation and prototyping. It's quicker and easier and faster to do than ever before. Make sure you understand at the start what success looks like. And then a way that you're going to measure that you've got there so that when you arrive, you know you've arrived, for starters. And one thing I will say on that as well is there will be rabbit holes aplenty on that journey where you fall into the trap, and we've done it, right?
Yeah.
We could do this and do this and do that. Try and stay on that path to get to that outcome. And then you decide whether you're going to stop that project because it didn't really work, you're going to repeat it, or scale it in the business. But I think you can do that, and you can have these projects running as and you can run multiple of them, but just make sure that each strand of those projects is being run in that cycle, because not all of them, in fact, there's probably, you guys probably have stats around it, but most AI projects fail, right? They do, because they start at a very different point in this journey, and some things were just never meant to be solved with AI, frankly.
Absolutely.
And that's that's, I guess, one thing I would say. Every single speaker at the conference, this was their underneath it all, this was their message. This is how to approach it. And I think you guys agree on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
100%.
so I was thinking, what should an SME who's listening to this podcast do? We release this on a Friday, should do on Monday morning, right? I'm going to say build a couple of personal agents. Let's start small. Build a couple of personal agents. Build one that looks at the latest news and events that took place last week that is relevant to your business, and get it to inform you every day, every other day. Bring that information to you rather than you going to find it. Then create an agent that does exactly the same thing for what's just happened last week. What happened last week in the business? Go and have a look. Who have I not responded to? What email have I not put? Who do I need to get back to? What tasks that I need to complete that's high on my agenda? Prioritize them for me and let me know the gaps. Remind me of how do I kick off my week in a way that allows me to continue to do business and be responsive and active. So the question, I think, for you, Andy, what would you say, apart from personal agents, what would you say is a really safe first agent or automation project that an SME can kick off with?
Yeah, I think especially for those that are listening that perhaps are maybe budget constrained or people constrained, maybe a very small micro SME or solo founder. This one's for you, right? So literally, you can even ask AI, like, can you be my AI consultant? Right? Talk to it and say, look, this is the things. This is a bit about my business. These are, like you said, Lionel, these are the things I've done this week. Here's my process. Now, can you just ask me a series of questions so that I can help prioritize which ones I think should be high impact, low complexity issues in my business that I can solve with Copilot or Claude or fill in the blank AI tool that I have today. I think if you can just do that and just have the conversation with your agent, right? Let it decide. And that's just like free advice that anybody should just try and do and play,
Yeah,
because
amazing.
it's very accessible to anyone. And sometimes I have to do that myself. In fact, I'm talking to AI constantly and saying, look, I've got these ideas. Help me think through that. And you do obviously find some gaps in the answers, but use that as your guidepost for that first implementation you want to do Monday morning next week. I'll just say, leave it at that.
Fantastic. And we all know how far thinking and reasoning capabilities are coming along with all these tools that we're using. So very quickly before we close and get onto our closing bit, a quick one for you, Matthew. So fair enough building these things. What do you think businesses should measure so that shiny AI agent doesn't just become a shiny object or experiment?
I think you need to start almost by forgetting AI, right? What impact do I want this to make in my business? Is it to help us win more business? Is it to help us reduce manual work and automate our processes? Is it to deliver a better customer service? Is it to help us market better? These are the important things that matter in business, and whether it's the internet, whether it's print and all the things I mentioned earlier, they've always stayed constant. That's what you need. You need to set those business goals, those business objectives, and then see how AI can be woven into the fabric of what you do to help you get there faster, better, smarter. And that's it. You start with the goals that actually matter to your business, not the ones that are frankly distractions, right? And cool stuff. Caveat that last thing, and this is probably the last thing from me on this podcast. Make time to play as well. What a lot of what I've just said is really serious, and you need that business mindset in terms of applying AI. But personally, I think you need to play so that you learn, because you need the knowledge to understand first what it can do, what it can't do, and to spot those opportunities. And sometimes if you just play, you pick up, you have those little aha moments, and then you connect the dots to go, that problem that I have over here could be solved by that feature or that function that I've just played with. So I think there's time and space needed in businesses for both of those things.
So closing challenge, one piece of advice or challenge very quickly that each of us would give to everyone listening. So go on, Matthew.
On first, I would say there's a lot of emphasis on AI producing stuff. I think people know it can write content and it can now write code and do all of that stuff. So I kind of want people are going to do that anyway, right? So my piece of advice to you is maybe think about what AI could do differently for you that isn't generating stuff. One thing that AI is really, really good at, particularly with Claude and other such tools, they have connectors now, so you can connect via MCPs to lots of different data sources. And many, many businesses, particularly SMEs, have lots of SaaS products with data kind of all over the place. Why not use AI to just surface stats to you, things that matter to your business, those KPIs? How many people visited our website last week? How many people completed our contact form? Connect it to analytics and find out where they came from. Use it to actually enhance your knowledge, not just make stuff. I think that's where people are often missing the trick.
Thank you. Andy, what do you say?
Yeah, I would say something a little bit similar actually for SMEs, as Matt just said. Co-work in Microsoft or co-work in Claude is absolutely fantastic now. So you've probably got a breadth of data across different platforms. You've got fragmented systems, whether it's your CRM, where you capture your notes, where you capture your maybe other systems, different systems of record. Some of these, as you said, have connectors, and now we've got capability of some Microsoft co-work and then also Claude co-work to connect. So I'll give you an example of what I do every day, right? 8:30 every morning, I've got a co-work task that runs and tells me, go to my emails that were sent and received, go to my notes that were written, go to my deals in HubSpot, and just tell me every morning what's the most pressing things I need to do today to make sure I've closed the loop, right, on the things I've committed to and sent to a client, or sent to, I promised I'd send to maybe Lionel from my meeting and I had last week, right? Or to that deal that I had with Matt that was in my HubSpot that I need to follow up on. And just having that scheduled task has been like instrumental for me. And I think it'll be instrumental to anybody who's got one of these licenses, whether it's Microsoft Co-work or Claude Co-work, but they are fantastic tools that anybody can use now.
Amazing. I'm just gonna finish off now by saying, I think if you're an owner in a business, we know, I'm speaking to you directly, we know that the change needs to be an organizational change. And one bit of advice I'll say is give someone the time, authority, and accountability to take the lead with AI, even if you don't want to do it in your organization. Get them to show you what you do. Don't be afraid, because employees genuinely want to get stuck in. So the winners won't be businesses that just talk about AI. The businesses that are going to win are the ones that are going to start with a workflow. They're going to make it better. They're going to learn from it, and they're going to keep going. And they're going to keep going, and they're going to keep going. And what's going to happen over time is that efficiency becomes cumulative, right? It stacks on each other. And before you know it, your output is more than employing one entire person in a year. Then it becomes, you might have 3, 4, 5 man days, coming to you every single day just by automating. So thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast and look forward to the next one. Thank you guys.
Yeah. Thanks guys. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye bye.